Hello everyone, welcome to Global Watch with Dr. Sean Lin. So for today's program, I'm going to talk about a new wave of smearing campaign launched by the Chinese Communist regime against the United States. There are several aspects. The first one is about virus origin, and then the second one is against former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. I'll focus on these two. And the first one is about virus origin, and we know the Chinese spokeswoman Hua Chunying recently stated very clearly, very strongly to blame the United States Army lab for Rhetoric as the origin of the COVID-19 outbreak. This is not like last year. Last year when their spokesperson Zhao Lijian talked about U.S. military lab might be the source of the COVID-19. At the time, he was only suspecting it. He didn't use very strong confirmative terms. But Hua Chunying is very different this time. Why Chinese government suddenly enhanced their rhetoric against the United States on this aspect? So of course, many people think, oh, that's because WHO went into China to inspect or I don't know if it can be called inspect, or maybe to check or collaborate with Chinese governments regarding about the early outbreak situations in Wuhan, in China. And this time they can go into Wuhan after months of negotiation with the Chinese government. But is this the main reason? Does the Chinese government really care a WHO team entering Wuhan? Of course, they won't let the WHO scientists or experts talk to the local residents who complain Chinese government's hard lockdown policies. They won't let any people talk to these experts. They will arrange someone for them to talk to. Right? So Chinese government is easily to control what the results can come out of these so-called independent WHO investigation groups. The Communist Party has all the control on this aspect. Why do they worry about this? Right? So I don't think this is the main reason. And then another reason is that another reason people suspect is that because like Mike Pompeo met Pottingers, talked to the press, that they have more evidence now in the Department of State showing that the Chinese P4 lab in Wuhan, in the Institute of Virology, might be the source of leaking the virus into the public and causing the pandemic. And the Department of State also mentioned that the Wuhan Institute of Virology had many employees showing symptoms like COVID-19 in late 2019, even in late fall of the 2019. So all the evidence point out that Wuhan might be might have a lab leak and might be the real origin of the outbreak, right? So Chinese government definitely mad about this. They are always worried that the whole world will hold them accountable for leaking the virus and spreading the virus globally. That might be a bigger reason that Chinese government want to launch a counterattack, a big wave of disinformations against the United States statements. And after the Biden administration started, actually the rhetoric changed a little bit in the U.S. government. They keep talking about should not use the China virus to describe COVID-19, should not play the political blame, right? So if Biden administration already tuned down the criticisms against Chinese communist regime on COVID-19 issue, why Chinese government suddenly need to enhance its levels to counterattack U.S. criticisms? So this second reason might be a bigger factor, but I don't think that's the main reason. So in my analysis, I think the biggest reason the Chinese government launched this huge disinformation campaign in China right now is because they know it's very hard for them to control the pandemic right now in China. many of the province in northern part of China is experiencing very strong lockdown, brutal, barbaric lockdown, just like what happened in Wuhan last year. Tens of millions of people were locked down. In some of the cities, like Tonghua in northern China, a city of 300,000 people, the government can order to lock down everyone in their home overnight. People wake up in the morning, found out their doors were sealed by the government, and the mayor realized he did not have a team to deliver food for people 2 weeks after the lockdown. This is how the Chinese government did the lockdown, right? So, as a sidetrack, I can mention the Chinese government lockdown is not a strategy, it's not a tool to contain the disease from the public health operation aspect. Their lockdown is a sacrifice of human life, regardless whether they can contain the outbreak or not. So there's a very clear distinction. The lockdown happened in the Western society, whether it's in the UK, in the United States, it's government making a policy asking people to follow these suggestions or restrictions. People can have the option to go out to buy their food, and people can restrict their travelings or stay at home more, do work at home, but nobody will seal the gate of your building or lock your selves inside the apartments. No government in Western society would do this extreme measure. That's why the lockdown in the Western society is for containing the disease, but the hard lockdown happened in China is to sacrifice human beings, and regardless the price the people will pay. So very clear distinction. So I want to highlight about this. So back to about the disinformation campaign the Chinese government launched at this critical time is because they realize they're facing a huge danger. The pandemic will have a full blown inside China again, probably even worse than last year. So now they need to quickly find someone to blame, right? The Chinese government has already started to blame foreign forces for importing the virus into China. They can blame different frozen food become the source of bringing the virus into China, or some foreign travelers came into China and bringing the virus to China. So they've been playing this rhetoric for a while now, and probably it's not convincing enough. So now they need to use an even stronger, very convincing tone to brainwashing more Chinese people to believe the US is the one to blame for the outbreak, for the pandemic, for all the Chinese people suffering under the pandemic, under the hard lockdown policy by the Chinese government. That's why they crank up this tone and launch huge disinformation campaign on the social media in China, on the Weibo, on the WeChat, and some of these you can say like tweets or Weibo post got 1 billion views in China, because the government's driving it, forcing people to accept this kind of message. US is the one to blame. So in the future, if another very bad outbreak occurred across the nation, they can direct people's anger against the United States, not against the Chinese government. So now they start to pave their road for their escape route. So this disinformation campaign is Chinese government tactic to avoid being severely criticized by the Chinese people, or they facing collapse if people know the true situation in China. Chinese local government can do a lot of show nowadays. They can always say, my city, 8 million people, I want to do 4 nucleic acid tests for all residents in my 8 million cities in 1 week. I can do it in 1 week. Many of cities boosting this kind of capacity, but did they really do it? The local government is very corrupted. will they really do these testings, and how efficient the testing is, how specific their testing are. They don't care about these details. The local government just want to let the central government know, I'm handling this pandemic, and the central government give me some financial support for doing this 8 million people nucleic acid testing, right? They want to earn money from the central government's budget. So from the central government to the local government, everybody know they are lying about the disease prevention work. And so they also want to find someone to blame, a scapegoat in the future if the real disaster happened in China. So U.S. become an easy target, an easy scapegoat that they can identify. So now start to, crank up all the propaganda machine to blame U.S. as a source of outbreak. U.S. is standard in China. U.S. is the one bringing the virus into China. So when they keep talking about this, more and more Chinese people will be brainwashed. So that's their tactic. So that's why I want to highlight don't think Chinese people care about WHO's going to China. This is not the reason they do this large disinformation campaign. So the second disinformation campaign is about attacking Mike Pompeo, because Mike Pompeo designate Chinese government's suppression in Xinjiang, in the Uyghur area, as a genocide, crime against humanity, 2 days before he left his office. So Chinese government definitely is very mad about it. But how do they respond to this? So they mobilize local people, local residents in Xinjiang, in these Uyghur regions, and asking people to do these public statements in front of the TV camera saying, we local people, we are Uyghur people, we supporting the Chinese government's policy, we enjoy a very happy life in Uyghur. Let's Chinese government's counter attack on this situation. But isn't it kind of ridiculous, because many people from Western countries can see this very clearly. This is like a show, right? Nobody believing people were able to tell the truth under this kind of dictatorship, under this kind of very strong government pressure. How could they tell the truth in front of camera? If they tell the truth, they were put into this concentration camp again, right? So nobody believe it. I think Chinese government also know the common folks, they don't believe this at all. And so the government know they are lying, and the Chinese people know the government is lying, and the Chinese government know the Chinese people know they are lying, but they're still doing it. Why? That's because, I think one of the reasons is because, remember when in Trump administration, when the US government criticized China's suppression and even killing people in Uyghur areas, Chinese government mobilized 37 other countries in the Middle East, many Muslim countries, African countries, to support their policies in Uyghur area. So when Secretary Pompeo designate these human rights violations in Xinjiang area as a genocide, the highest level of human rights abuse, right? It's like comparing the Chinese communist regime to the Nazi government. They're killing Uyghur people just like the Nazis killed Jewish people. That's a genocide, right? So when these highest levels of designation was announced by Secretary Mike Pompeo, Chinese government totally lost face. They feel totally humiliated or being fully exposed. And also for those 37 countries, they will feel like slap in their face because you're supporting a Nazi type of Chinese government. So Chinese government need to find a way to find explanation to these other countries. So one of the things they can do is mobilize local people, forcing them to make statements supporting the government. So now the Chinese government can tell the other countries, say, see, I'm still got local people to support me, I'm doing the right thing. So they at least find something to fence out these people's angry about being humiliated, to side with the Chinese government. And I also believe the other 37 countries, they know Chinese government is doing this show, but they also need excuses to console themselves, to forgive themselves. They had to say, oh, you see, Chinese government still have Chinese people supporting it. Maybe this is still a controversial issue. We still don't know whether Chinese people in Xinjiang area is killed by the Chinese government or not. They kind of hide behind these excuses for this country who supported the China's suppression policies. So I think that's one of the main reasons the Chinese government is still doing it, even though they know they are lying. The Chinese people know they are lying, and they know the Chinese people know they are lying. Right? So that's everything's fake in this kind of situation, and so there are different reasons for Chinese government to launch this kind of disinformation campaign. I think for people outside, we need to see clearly, and we also need to pay close attention to see if the Biden administration will change their policy on the Uyghur issues. Because the nominees for ambassador to UN is Linda. Her name is Linda Thomas Greenfield. So Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield actually recently stated that the Department of State is reviewing this designation to designate the policy as a genocide in Uyghur area. Why did she make this kind of statement? Because the Secretary Blinken didn't make this announcement, and she was just a ambassador to UN. She's not in charge of the Department of State. And if Secretary Blinken did not say he need to review these designations, why she did that? This part is very weird in this situation. Because for senior diplomats, you were jumping ahead of your boss to make this kind of policy statement. This is actually a very dangerous move for a career diplomat. You may lose your job by simply making that statement. Why she did that? So people maybe noticed that she was actually heavily criticized in her hearing, in her confirmation hearing in the Senate. Many senators questioned about her speech in Savannah State University in 2019 when she accepted the invitation by Confucius Institute to make speech in that university, and she mentioned that China and United States both can be a positive force in the continent of Africa. So that basically is supporting Chinese government's Belt and Road Initiative in Africa, or even many African countries blaming Chinese communist regime using debt trap, in Africa, and take advantage of their natural resources, and exploit local labor forces and suppressing local job. Many local African countries have a lot of complaint on this BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, the Chinese government launched globally. So why Ambassador Linda Thomas Greenfield want to support Chinese government's policy? And so that's why her situation for making the statement that Department of State will review this designation of the genocide on China's policy in Uyghur area is quite bizarre. And will she actually proactively making statement to support the Chinese government? We don't know. Well, but anyway, I think we need to pay close attention. We need to pay close attention to the policies from Biden administrations in terms of whether they will stick to be tough against Chinese communist regime, or they will be back to the engagement situation that was actually lasted for a long time from Clinton administration to Obama administration. And I hope that won't happen. Otherwise, Chinese communist regime will be even more rampant in cracking down many of the Chinese people, regardless their ethnic background or religious background. Hope that won't happen. But I'm not totally optimistic on that. Well, that's all for today's program. Thank you for watching Global Watch with Sean Lin. If you like my program, please subscribe and hopefully see you next time.